Now let's go back and review something very important that we must understand clearly before moving on. We're going to look back at two important rules of programming and see how we can make them both work together. On one hand, we have the rule about declaration. As you've noticed for sure by now, in C++ it is impossible to make use of anything without first declaring it, without first introducing it to the compiler. You can't just go ahead and start making use of standard cout to print stuff out to the screen without first having included the file that declares what is cout. You can't begin making use of some variable, some object x, and assign 10 to that object before having first declared what is x. Neither can you go ahead and just call a function without having first declared that function earlier before. You can't begin instantiating objects of your own custom class before you went ahead and created that class, before you declared that class. More specifically, when the compiler begins compiling your code, it reads everything you typed up line by line, letter by letter, everything in the order that it was typed. That's why right over here, when the compiler is going to start reading this program line by line, letter by letter, when it's going to reach by this line over here where I call the doStuff function, it's going to wonder, hey, wait a second, what is doStuff? I never heard of a function like that. Even though, as you can see later on, after the main function, I do declare and define the doStuff function, but that's not good enough. It has to be declared and defined before I ever begin using it. Well, actually, it needs to at least be declared somewhere before you begin using it. As we learned about the difference between the declaration and the definition of something, when the compiler reads your source file and it sees the declaration of this function over here, it's as if we're telling him, look, we are going to make a function that's called doStuff. I'm not going to define all of the details right now. You're going to get all the details later on. But for now, please allow us to start using this function doStuff. And so the compiler allows us to start using the function doStuff, provided that, of course, at some point eventually, you will define the full definition of this function. The same rules go for classes. If I want, I could just go ahead and put the whole entire declaration and definition of the class right before I begin using it. Or, like we did with the function doStuff, at least we need to declare what is this soldier class before I begin making a soldier John in my program. And then eventually, I need to finish the job of defining all of the methods and constructors and destructors, etc. of this class that I created. So this is all the first rule, that before you begin talking about anything, you need to first introduce it and declare it, and then we could start using it, etc. Now, if we would only go with that rule, we would probably think that the best thing is to just go ahead and declare and define all of my functions and classes right before I begin using them in my program. Like right over here, I'm declaring and defining the doStuff function, the soldier class, everything together, and then just go ahead and start using them in my main program, without bothering to separate the declaration in one place and the definition somewhere else. We're just sticking to the simple rule that everything must be declared and defined first, and then we can go ahead and start using it. But then we have, on the other hand, the second rule. The second rule is that we always want to separate the declaration and the definition of something. It has to do with the way object-oriented programming works. As we learned once before, when you buy a machine like a refrigerator or something, all you know and care about it is that you have to plug it into the wall and start putting your food inside the refrigerator, and that's it. And unless you're a technician or a gizmo geek, you're not just going to start digging into the system of the refrigerator and opening it up and playing around with the inside. Most of the time, you don't even want to look at the insides. You just want to leave it alone, learn how to use it, and let it work its magic. And that's how object-oriented programming works. When you type up a class, you shouldn't expose to everyone all of the code, all the source code of how your class works and what it does. The most that you'd like to expose is just how to make use of it, what functions to call and what stuff to pass into them, and that's it. The declaration of a class, like this class over here, class soldier, is more than enough of what you'd like to expose of your class to whoever is going to be making use of it, even yourself. The declaration of a class is like an instruction manual of how to make use of it. I see over here one constructor that takes no parameters. Okay, great. That means that anytime I want to instantiate an instance of the class soldier, I'll just go ahead and do that plain and simple, like creating a regular integer variable and not pass in any parameters. Now I know how to use the soldier class. The definition of a class, which means the implementation of its functions, of the methods and the constructors and destructors, that is like the internal systems of the refrigerator. We do not want to expose that to anyone. That is the ugly, dirty details of how the system works internally, of whatever mysterious magic goes on behind the scenes, how this soldier class works. I don't want to worry or care about anything that the soldier class does internally. I just want to know how to use it, and that's it. Anything I need to know should be evident from the declaration of the class, and if I need any help, then probably there will be some comments telling me a few more important things I need to know. And if there's more to it, then there should probably be an instruction manual of how should I make use of this soldier class. But the point is that in object-oriented programming, I never ever peek into the internal systems, into the definition of a class. This should be separated away elsewhere where I won't see it. It's not impossible to go see it. You could if you want to, but you shouldn't want to. It makes life so much easier when you could just look at the header, figure out what to do, and go ahead and start using your class. Of course, as the creator of the class, you're anyways going to have to go and type up all the code of the definition of the class. But from the very start, keep it all separate. Keep the header in one place and the definition somewhere else, so that one day all you'll ever need is to look at the header and the definition will be totally locked away. So that's the second rule, about separating things into different places, different files, to comply with the rules of object-oriented programming. So now it seems like we have a little conflict. On the one hand, according to the first rule we just mentioned, if I want to use the soldier class over here in main, I must have it all declared already before I can start using it. That makes me want to type up the whole entire soldier class right over here in main before I start using it. But on the other hand, according to the second rule, this would be really bad practice. First of all, technically it would be terribly inconvenient if we're talking about lots of classes and huge classes all typed up one after the other in one single file. That would be terrible. For organization's sake, we would definitely want to have a way of separating things into different files. But even that's not enough. We even want to have two different other files, one for the declaration of the class and one for the definition, because the second rule is that we must separate the declaration from the definition. So how do we resolve this problem of making sure that we have everything declared before we start using it in our program, anywhere in our program, and yet at the same time separate all the declarations into other places, other files? Putting things into other files in different places makes me think that maybe by the time I'll need to use something, it's not going to be declared because it's somewhere else. It's in a different file. How can we make sure to comply to both rules, to make sure that everything is well declared before using it, and at the same time well separated into different files?